By the way, I apologize in advance. The lighting situation is not great and you're gonna see one of my lamps reflecting in my glasses the entire time. Unfortunately, it is November and it gets dark at goddamn 4:30 p.m. So yeah, the lighting situation is a bit improvised. I'm sorry, it's not great. I hope it's not too distracting, but there's also really nothing I can do about it. Hi everyone and welcome to this new video. I'm the Hoarding Puffin and today I'm gonna just talk about the costumes of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein for like an hour. I am a big fan of Frankenstein in almost any shape. I first read it when my English course in school was doing Gothic literature and we weren't doing Frankenstein. But then I got curious and so I read it myself. I was like 15 or 16 then, I think. And I've been obsessed ever since. Mary Shelley is such a fascinating person to me. I love the book. I've read it in English. I recently finally got myself a really gorgeous German copy that I haven't started yet, but I'm very excited to. I actually never read this in German before, so that will be fun. I'm also actually a cast member on a Frankenstein retelling audio drama. By the way, just among us, the Frankenstein Files season 1 just wrapped and we're currently on a season break before we return with season 2 in 2026. So if you needed now is the perfect time to listen to it, and if that sweetens the pot, unlike almost every adaptation of Frankenstein, we actually have Henry Clavell. We have Henry. Alright, enough with the gross self-promo, he said on their own YouTube channel. But anyways, point is, I'm a big fan of Frankenstein. I'm also a very big fan of Guillermo del Toro's movies in general. I am obsessed with filmmaking overall, so I was very hyped for this movie. That being said, this is not going to be a review of the movie. This movie is kind of where I knew two of my special interests would be coalescing. We have the filmmaking that I've been obsessed with my entire life, or almost my entire life, and we have the aspect of costumes and sewing and all of that. And when I found out that the costumes were going to be made by Kate Hawley, I pretty much was like, okay, I'm going to be obsessed with this no matter what, because she also did the costumes on Crimson Peak, and without any pun, the costumes in that movie are genuinely peak. They are just perfect. They are perfect. So, yeah, I knew this was going to be amazing, and I knew I was going to need to yell about it somehow, somewhere. So that's what this video is for. I will say though, please do not expect Bernadette Benner levels of analysis and review of these costumes. This is not a costume review. It is a costume analysis that is not taking into consideration historical accuracy. I'm not a dress historian, and whilst I am really hype and really interested in dress history, that's not what interested me about the costumes in this movie, so that's also not what I'm going to be focusing on. Also, I know that there is a book on the production. I have ordered it. It has not arrived yet. So all of my information either comes from looking at photos people posted of the exhibit in London that showcases some of the costumes, from the actual film itself, and partially from interviews with the cast that I've seen. So there may or may not be things that I'm missing from the book, but I don't really know when the book is gonna arrive. So I really wanted to get this video out because I've not stopped thinking about these costumes since I watched the movie, and I watched it on October 24th in theaters, because miraculously my town was one of the few in Germany that actually showed the movie in theaters, which I felt very lucky to get that. But yeah, all of that being said, This is me indulging some of my special interests. This is me indulging my love for costumes. I'm just gonna be yelling about the costumes. It will be sorted by the characters. I will exclude some of the background characters, so I won't talk about extras, costumes, I'm also going to exclude the family at the mill house, the cottage, just because I really want to focus mainly on the main cast. So, yeah. I think that's everything. I think that is everything to be said. So yeah, just by all means, get comfortable, grab a snack, some tea or coffee, grab your current crafting projects, and let's talk about the costumes of Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. We will start with the Danish sailors on the Horizont. Since they are part of the Marine or Navy or whichever is the name of the Danish equivalent, they are in a uniform which consists of blue wool trousers and matching coats with golden detailing as well as matching hats. For most of them, we never actually see what they wear underneath their coats, apart from the occasional neck of a chunky knit blue jumper showing. The exception are two characters, the captain and the ship's doctor, whom we do see without their coats on. They are both wearing a finer, more detailed and almost quilted-looking cream knit jumper, as well as waistcoats that are blue wool in the front and a cream cotton or linen in the back. They also have watch chains that I believe are silver. Now, I can think of two reasons as to why they would have some notably different clothing from the rest of the crew. One, it might just be for visuals. It looks a lot nicer on camera to have some additional light colors to contrast with the dark. Two, it's to show status and rank. A doctor and captain respectively hold a higher rank on a ship than a regular sailor. So I do believe it's probably the latter, but I can't tell for sure. The sailors obviously also wear chunky boots, and some of them wear either leg warmers or socks as well that are sort of rolled over the top of the boots. They also have fingerless gloves, either in a blue, gray, or cream color, and most of them seem to be wearing a sort of knitted blue cowl that only leaves their faces free and is worn underneath their uniform hats. We do see some more variety when they walk out onto the ice to investigate the explosion and retrieve an injured victor. Here they are wearing some additional very chunky gloves or mittens with 3 fingers, one for the thumb and then the other 2 for the other 4 fingers to go in. They also have scarves that are wrapped around their heads and their faces. And they have small snow goggles that almost reminded me of like Victorian spectacles and a sort of overcoat. I'm not sure what material these overcoats are. I'm guessing either a thin leather or a waxed, tarpy, canvasy sort of fabric. They are only worn in a very brief scene that is set at night and lit with torches. So I'm not sure what material it is. I'm also not sure on the color. My best guess is a sort of undyed cream white sort of color though. And then obviously all of the sailors have some individual details like belts, tools, and so on. Also, after Victor's injuries have been treated, he is given a clean linen shirt and a set of the same blue wool trousers. So I'm guessing that that shirt is probably also part of the uniform of the sailors. There isn't really much to say or analyze about the sailors. They don't exactly go through a heap of costume changes, but I really appreciate how realistic they look for people on an exploration for the North Pole in the 1800s. I think this is around the early 1860s or very late 1850s. I also really like the many small details like the visual distinction of the captain and the doctor, the little, well, they're not little, the chunky gloves that aren't quite mittens, because obviously if you're on a Arctic mission, you need the warmth of mittens, but you need more dexterity. so that it's like the two fingers was really interesting to me. And I'm, for some reason, really obsessed with the small spectacle like snow goggles. I thought those were so darling. The staff at the Frankenstein estate are primarily dressed in black and white, with the male staff showing a tiny detail of dark red on one of the sleeves. I won't say too much on the staff since these are background characters and I want to focus on the lead cast primarily. But one thing that is very notable to me is that the female staff seems to be almost always wearing a veil. They have these half-sheer white veils on in the scene where Baron Frankenstein returns home, and then during the funeral scenes, they are actually completely veiled in an opaque white fabric over what looks to me like maybe fur-trimmed cloaks. And at this point, they also have white flower wreaths on their heads. They really look like ghosts. The male staff looks almost military-esque, kind of mirroring Alphonse. And during the funeral of Claire, they actually appear to be veiled as well, with a sheer black fabric sort of wrapping around their faces very tightly underneath their top hats. Now, I unfortunately don't have my behind-the-scenes book yet, so I don't know if it says anything in there about the veils. And there is a chance that I misinterpreted the scene and the male characters aren't actually wearing them. But I sent screenshots of the movie to a lot of people to like confirm what I was seeing. So I'm like 90% sure that I'm correct, that almost everyone essentially in the scene is veiled. And so my hypotheses are going to be built off of that. I talked about this with my friend Arlo, and Arlo suggested that the veils could sort of be symbolic of Victor's isolation. Unlike in the novel, where Victor's childhood is very happy and picturesque, in this film he is constantly isolated and lonely, and the veils could work to sort of underline this. They make the servants faceless, without identity, giving Victor even less people to connect with. And after Claire's death, that leaves him absolutely alone, since his entire sense of self is attached to her. This is even expressly said in the narration during this scene. And if that is indeed the intention behind the veils, then that is really, really neat, a really fun way to illustrate that. Also, I cannot think of any other film where a male character is veiled. So that was really fun. That was a fun detail to me. Frankenstein Sr. is, of course, masterfully played by Charles Dance, and he is an intimidating thing to behold. He is shown in what I believe are two main outfits. The first one being a uniform of sorts. Granted, we don't see a lot more than a cloak and a bicorn hat, but those do look very military-esque. The bicorn has a detail of a rosette and a metallic sort of plaque that is a finger pointing upwards. And the cloak has these floral metal clasps and embroidery on the collar. I have tried so hard, and so far I've not been able to figure out what the embroidery is saying on the collar. I have not been able to find enough angles in the film. I've not been able to find photos, but it seems to be Latin, and it starts with the word verus, which means truth or true, and ends in fidelis, which I believe means loyal. So maybe that is a motto of some sort. I really don't know. When he's not wearing the cloak and hat, Alphonse is wearing a pretty standard masculine fit. A waistcoat with a tailcoat or overcoat of some sorts, and trousers that are all black, and then a white linen undershirt and a necktie. The waistcoat does seem to have some very subtle dark red detailing, at least during the lunch scene. And then later he also is wearing an order on a dark red ribbon. Now, I did try to figure out what kind of order this is. I found a very clear close-up picture of it from the exhibit in London that I sent to a friend of mine who happens to be both a history and clothing fanatic, much as myself, and a professional art restorateur. And they said it looks like the Belgian Croix de Guerre, which is a World War I war cross. Now, with the movie being set in the 1800s, that is obviously impossible. So my guess is it's either an older cross that happens to look the same, or it could simply be a case of the costuming department sourcing something from an antique shop or something of the sort. One thing that I want to note that I really appreciate is, despite the majority of Alphonse's clothing being black, they are anything but plain. There's actually a lot of detail created through ribbons and trims and piping. And I love that because I hate little as much as a character who is just dressed in single texture plain black. Especially if it's a character that is supposed to be of wealth and status. So I'm really happy that while it is all very unicolored, there is so much subtle detailing there. I really like that. Claire, same as Alphonse, isn't in a large part of the movie, but she is an incredibly significant character, and her design language is incredibly poignant. Her signature color is a bright red. It's important that we're saying bright. Now, I won't get around talking about the color red symbolism in this movie, at least a little, but I will keep it to costumes only. If you want a more in-depth look on how exactly Del Toro uses the color red in this movie, I actually recommend my friend Marcus Noyes' videos on the subject. Okay, so back to Claire. She is seen in 3 outfits total. One is just a simple white nightgown with a white shawl that we see for like 10 seconds. So I will be talking about the other 2. Outfit 1, which I would call her main outfit, is a black and white striped dress that is covered with a red sheer overdress. I'm thinking probably a chiffon, maybe a tulle. In some of the scenes, she also wears this with a sort of tall headdress that is shaped like a bonnet and that has a matching veil out of the same very floaty red sheer fabric. She also wears a black and silver crucifix necklace with this and long red gloves that I believe are probably a velour. The second outfit is all velvet. This film's costuming uses a lot of velvet and I am so here for it. I absolutely love the look of velvet. I'm so happy to see so much of it. So it's a red velvet dress, and she wears it with the same long velour gloves and a sheer red shawl wrapped around herself. She also wears a different necklace with this that looks like it might be ivory. At any rate, it depicts feminine and masculine masks together with grapes and lengthy amphoras. So my guess is Bacchus or possibly Dionysus. Both of those were gods of wine and celebration from Rome and Greece, respectively, that were also associated with things like theater, insanity, and some other things. I don't know how much of this symbolism is intentional, but I can imagine that the connection to theater and masks might be referencing Claire sort of having to essentially restrain herself and put on a mask whenever her husband is home, since we are told and shown very explicitly that Alphonse is not exactly kind and he is incredibly controlling. So red is Claire's color, and then the black and white seems to almost be treated like Alphonse's colors, at least in these early scenes. Other than on Claire herself and later on Victor, the color red is not really found in the Frankenstein estate as much. And if it is barely visible, and it is a dark and very subdued shade of red, unlike Claire's red that is bright. which this might or might not be symbolical for that same restraint and suppression of self through Alphonse and the barely existent influence Claire manages to have on her husband. It might also just be that they wanted just that tiny bit more color on these otherwise black and white costumes, but considering how intentional everything about this movie is, I feel reluctant to believe that, especially when it comes to the color red. The idea that red symbolizes Claire's influence on the family specifically is also visible in some of young Victor's costumes. Young Victor is almost always dressed in an undyed white linen, usually an ensemble of a shirt, trousers, and waistcoat, sometimes worn with a black velvet jacket over top, or the other quote-unquote outfit he is in is a long linen nightgown. Specifically, Victor is in that black jacket in moments when he is either confident or he is masking his true emotions, when he's essentially acting as guarded as possible, whereas we see him in just the white whenever he is in a more vulnerable state, with the most vulnerable being at night when he is praying to the statue of his guardian angel. The use of linen is very interesting to me. Obviously, it was just an accessible fabric at the time, but linen is this light material that wrinkles very easily, and the way it is used for young Victor's costumes make him look fragile and at times almost ghost-like. And it also provides a heartbreaking contrast to the red of Claire's blood when she touches his arm and shoulder as she goes into labor with William. And I do think that this is intentional, him looking like a ghost in his own home, something that is, sort of without agency, without autonomy even. I don't know. Maybe I'm overinterpreting this, but I love that look, that fragile appearance that they give the young version of Victor. After Claire has died, he becomes a lot more guarded, and that translates directly to his costumes. From this point on, his clothing becomes more military-esque, and the white is almost entirely gone, unless it is the nightgown again. During the funeral, Victor wears a black velvet cloak with silver floral embroidery on the collar, as well as that same Latin lettering that is also on Alphonse's cloak. The cloak also has floral closures and a cross embellishing the side. Additionally, Victor begins to wear this black velvet waistcoat with line details in a non-shiny fabric that really reminded me of military uniforms with soutache. He also starts wearing a red silk necktie, sometimes with Claire's ring pulled onto it, so sort of like a brooch. Now, if we are following my theory on red representing Claire's influence, then this is essentially Victor being defiant. His clothing immediately after Claire is dead becomes more resemblant of his father's, down to the exact same embroidery on the cloak. His father trying to control Victor even more and mold him into a very specific shape, which is contrasting to Victor holding on to Claire by wearing her color so openly. After Alphonse also dies, Victor additionally starts wearing smooth red leather gloves that I've been told were also his late mother's. He doesn't have a good relationship with his father, and his only real tie to any other living being was to his mother. So him clinging onto that red and onto her memory by literally wearing her clothes as he assumes more and more autonomy within the family, especially after Alphonse's death, is just a really funky detail that carries through into his adult costumes as well. We only see William very briefly as a child, but one thing that was immediately apparent to me is how different he is dressed to anybody else we have seen so far. This is the first time we see a different color but white, black, or red worn by a Frankenstein. Young William is dressed in a silvery gray set of trousers and a little coat or jacket that is made from a bright turquoise fabric that is detailed with this delicate white lace, and he has a tiny little top hat with a matching turquoise band. These are completely new colors. And William, this is my interpretation, William grows up completely without Claire's influence, but unlike Victor, he actually receives affection from Alphonse. He is a less sullen and traumatized child, and Alphonse treats him to gifts and laughter and love, and doesn't try to shape him into a miniature version of himself. None of the pressure of being worthy of the Frankenstein name and legacy rests on William, and it's directly shown through his clothing as a child. Then we see him briefly at Alphonse's funeral, where he wears a black velvet cloak with the same cross that is also on Victor's, but that is lacking the silver embroidery on the collar. Underneath the cloak, he is dressed in white, again with a lot of lace. I'm interpreting this mix of the pure white and the frilliness as essentially an expression of innocence. William is literally like 3 apples tall in this scene. He is nearly an unwritten piece of paper, but also we have lost the brightness and the shininess of his previous outfit, which may or may not be visualizing that Alphonse's influence and affection are gone from his life now. Right, now we get to our main cast, and my god, what a cast it is, and what costumes. Our adult Victor is of course played by Oscar Isaac, and unlike the Victor in the book, he is not a young college student, but very much an adult that has had time to grow layers and layers of grumpiness and self-importance, ambition and arrogance around the gentle core of him that we saw in his childhood. It's kind of like mother of pearl wrapping around a grain of sand. I will go chronological, so for now we will disregard Victor's appearance in the very beginning of the film, especially since those clothes appear later, so we will get to them then. We will start with our first look on adult Victor in his prime, which is in 1855 in the lecture hall, where he tries to convince everybody of the genius of his inventions. Now, in interviews, it was said that this scene was created like a musical piece, and that this version of Victor is partially modeled after a rock star like Mick Jagger. And I absolutely see it. This Victor is dressed in black trousers and a nice black waistcoat that I believe is velvet once again, with some fine detailing that could be leather or ribbon, I'm not sure. He also wears the red necktie again, and obviously a white linen shirt. There are just a lot of white linen shirts in this film, and many of them are very low cut and or not buttoned up to the top. I'll just say this here now. A lot of scandalous chest showing in this movie. Anyways, the outfit is made complete with a small silver watch chain, and whenever Victor walks outside, he also has a black wool coat on and a hat that I'm guessing is a wool felt. It also sits so slanted on his head, and the brim is curved in such a funky way. I don't know anything about millinery, I apologize, but the hat is very funky to me, and it definitely lends itself to the whole rock star Victor Frankenstein aesthetic. And he also has the gloves again, the red leather gloves. He wears a nearly identical, or maybe actually just identical, I'm not fully sure, outfit when meeting Harlander in his residence, which is also when he is reuniting with his little brother and when he has his first meeting with Elizabeth. His shirt is definitely more unbuttoned in that scene compared to the hearing, by the way. When Harland and William take him to the old tower where he ends up building his laboratory, he is also again wearing the same outfit. We see him wear this ensemble a few other times. It is kind of his main look, one might say. When he is at the hanging picking out cadavers, which is a scene that then leads into his second interaction with Elizabeth in the confession stands and at supper, he has a white, subtly patterned waistcoat on with a white cravat instead of the red necktie, and he has a different jacket. Still black, but with a stripe pattern in a dark gray. I'm not sure what fabric it is. It might be wool, but truthfully, I really don't know. During the quote-unquote shopping scene, he's wearing a spin on his main outfit with the black jacket and the red necktie, but with a new pair of trousers that are black with a dark gray checkered pattern. The waistcoat in this fit is still at least partially velvet and has this intricate pattern of differently sized squares and rectangles. He wears this exact outfit on his character poster, and we see him wear at least the trousers again in the butterfly garden scene with Elizabeth, though here he is in the white waistcoat and tie from previously. I'm obsessed with these trousers, by the way. Specifically, I need a pair like so badly. Then we have what I call Lab Victor, another velvet waistcoat that in the film looks mostly plain dark blue, but in some of the pictures from the exhibit in London that I found online, it shows that it's actually very subtly patterned, a sort of tartan or checkered pattern with darker blues, yellows, and purples. I think the back of it is made out of leather, and it's center lacing almost like a corset, which looks quite funky and also looks like a spinal column, which is interesting because the spinal column appears over and over again throughout the movie, on costumes and just in general. He wears this in some but not all of the laboratory scenes. Sometimes it might also be the black waistcoat instead, and usually with a light colored leather apron as he experiments. And this is worn with the same black trousers as well as some really beautiful patterned black suspenders. At a soiree hosted by Harlander, Victor wears a dark red velvet jacket. It immediately reminded me of the red dress Claire wore in the beginning, and I'm honestly quite sad that it's only in this one short scene. I can't really tell what kind of waistcoat he wears with it. My best guess, it is sort of tartany again, but with a rusty red or brown color, possibly with a yellow or green. It is really hard to see. I watched the scene of the soiree frame by frame and I still don't know. Then his final laboratory fit. We have the white shirt again and the black detailed suspenders, and then a glorious set of trousers. They are this rusty orange checkered color and pattern, and they have stains. They have these stain patches on the leg that I've seen in a lot of photos from the exhibit, and they are also very much present in the movie. And to me, they look like bleach stains. I don't know if that is actually what they are, but they have to be some form of chemical stain, either from working in the lab or from trying to get blood out of the fabric. That's my guess. Victor wears these for the rest of his time at the tower as he continues the experiment and when the creature is actually brought to life. This ensemble is also worn with the red necktie again and the gloves. The next outfit is, I'm so sorry to say it this way, but it is the sluttiest fit we see him in. It's at night when he catches Elizabeth having gone to the creature and they have their debate on if it is or isn't intelligent. He is shirtless in the rust trousers and with this long silky robe on. It is red on the inside and a glorious shifty blue-green outside that remind me of beetle wings, specifically the color of some wood-boring beetles whose wings are used for beetle wing embroidery. It's only shown super briefly, but I love it. I low-key want to try and make my own. I need a silk robe to dramatically sulk in a corner with. The robe also seems to have some small holes or tears at the shoulder and collar, if I'm seeing it right in the scene, which, if I'm correct, is such a neat detail. Like I said, clothing shouldn't always be pristine, it should be flawed. Little details like that make it feel more alive. It's the same as the stain on that set of trousers. It's just subtly adding detail and richness to the overall world building. I'm obsessed. I love that so much. The next outfit we see Victor in is long after the explosion at the tower, when he is wallowing in bed in the Frankenstein estate. He is in a white undershirt that sort of looks like a Henley and black trousers, and by now he also has his cane, which is a sleek black thing with a curved silver handle, and he has his prosthetic leg. He changes out of this into finer clothing for the wedding celebration, which is another linen shirt with a white brocade waistcoat and again the black trousers. The waistcoat pattern looks like paisley to me, and he also has a white necktie on. At this point, he no longer has the red gloves on, which we've seen him wear more often than not for the majority of the movie. He also throws his black coat on over top of this as he confronts the creature and ends up killing Elizabeth, as well as an additional fur coat as he then follows the creature out into the snow. He continues to wear the fur coat as he hunts the creature in the Arctic with a furry hat and what looks like leather layers underneath. This is his hunting gear, and also the most covered up we've seen him. In an interview, Oscar Isaac described this as Victor becoming visually less human, more creature-esque, as the creature in turn becomes more and more human over the course of the film. And that is, I think, a very apt description of Victor in this part of the film in general, not just visually. And then the last outfit we see him wear is, like I mentioned, a simple linen shirt and wool trousers from the sailors on the Horizont. The first time we see Harlander is during Victor's disciplinary hearing. He walks into the lecturing hall, and the first thing we see of him are actually his boots, which have this golden or gilded metal sole that clanks against the floor, and then the camera pans up the rest of him. Harlander is wearing a sort of blue turquoise tartan trousers, with a turquoise or almost actually petrol blue velvet, I believe, waistcoat with a golden watch chain that has a reddish gemstone, a blue overcoat with like silky quilted lapel details, and then he has a dark, I'm guessing black top hat on, and obviously a white shirt with a black cravat. He has light ochre leather gloves, and he has a cane with an ornate carved ivory handle that depicts waves and a naked woman on her back. I am so obsessed with every bit of this outfit. I love the color, I love the trousers, the textures, it's just glorious. He also, I believe, may have tiny gemstones on the buttons of his shirt, which is so extra. In his Edinburgh residence, Harlander has changed into plain black trousers and a white floral brocade waistcoat with a white necktie, and he puts on a black tailcoat as Victor arrives. He wears it only briefly, but it matches with William's outfit in the same scene, which is a neat detail I'll get into in William's section. As they travel to the tower for the first time, Harlander wears a bronze golden floral brocade waistcoat, a black silky cravat, a long black wool cloak with this thick fox fur, and the top hat again. The cloak has some embroidery and soutache detailing on the front, on the back, and on the arm openings, and what I believe to be a bronzy lining. And okay, so the scene in the tower is lit in this gorgeous golden evening light, and the color of the waistcoat and the fox fur almost seem to be burning in the scene. It is gorgeous. Harlander has very few fits in this movie, but some of the most interesting ones in my opinion. Also, this fit had me sitting literally 2 centimeters away from my computer screen trying to figure out what exactly it was he was wearing. and I ended up having to rely on promotional photo material instead, because I really couldn't fully figure it out. In the shopping sequence, as well as the scene on the abandoned battlefield, he just wears his blue ensemble again. And during his soiree, he is in the same or a very similar ensemble as the one he wore when Victor first visited him. Though this time he has a dark petrol blue sash. And there is some detailing made with a fine sheer white fabric, adding a frill around the closures of his shirt. It creates a sort of eerie, fragile, insect wing-like shadow peeking out from his waistcoat, which is really funky. We see the same detail on William a few times. During the scene where Victor finds out about Harlander's disease and all the things that follow, including Harlander's death, he is just wearing the same ensemble from the beginning, though I believe his tie is a different one. I think this one is blue and it has a golden pin in it. I actually thought that Harlander had more different outfits, and I was sort of surprised that this wasn't the case when I went back to rewatch the film frame by frame. I suppose it is more realistic historically, but also it is an interesting detail on Harlander specifically. His outfits are always very elegant and extravagant. He presents himself in a very specific, almost ostentatious way, which makes sense for a man who is obsessed with his legacy due to being very aware of his own mortality. This man is vain. He wears gold-soled shoes, for goodness sake. It makes sense that he'd return to his fanciest fits whenever around company, especially Victor's, in whom he sees the solution to his inevitable death. He wants to impress. William, the first time we see him as an adult, is in an almost matching outfit to that of Harlander. Granted, his waistcoat is plain, his watch chain is less ornate, but immediately there is a sort of visual connection between him and Harlander and a visual distinction between him and Victor, the estranged brothers and the presumably replacement father figure. This is true a lot of the time. A lot of Williams' ensembles seem to sort of match with Harlander, or at least mirror them in some ways. And it's a really funky way to show how far he's lived himself away from Victor in every sense of that term. As they drive up to the tower, William is wearing what I believe to be light green trousers, tall brown riding boots that have some sort of tassel on the side, a green waistcoat, it's a bit hard to see with the lighting, a white hat, ochre gloves, and a coat that is similar to Harlander's in the same scene, trimmed with fur. It is a darker shade of a brownish fur though, not the bright oranges of Harlander's fox, and the coat is also notably less ornate than Harlander's. The coat also looks to be more of a dark turquoisey color, and William's tie is also more colorful. Honestly, I feel like he's the most colorful male character in this movie. It's very interesting to me. During the quote-unquote shopping scene, William wears cream trousers, a camel brown leathery coat with a lot of really glorious detailing that really you have to look at his character poster to really see. I feel like they almost vanish into the film. And he has a sort of matching waistcoat, a black tie, and the same ochre leather gloves again. His shirt is also actually like subtly striped or checkered instead of being plain white. He also has the same white hat and the riding boots again. He wears the same outfit, occasionally without the coat or with the fur-trimmed coat on top of it all instead, in pretty much all of the construction scenes in the laboratory. It is kind of strange though. The coloring for me was really hard to identify in many scenes, which is why I had to rely on the character poster, because depending on what the lighting was like, his clothing and his coloring seemed to shift almost more greenish or a dull brown instead of the bright goldeny amber color that it actually is. The ensemble he wears when he and Elizabeth come to the tower seem to all be amber colored or brown. And they all seem to be cut after a very similar pattern to the previous one. He's got darker trousers on. The jacket also definitely looks like a dark amber color. I think his tie is a dark red or maroon. And he has a paisley pocket square and also a paisley dark brown and bronze waistcoat. And again, we have this thing with, depending on the lighting, it goes either into golden, a brown color, or almost greenish. He has the same paisley waistcoat on again when Victor shows him Harlander's dead body and ushers him and Elizabeth away. But he has a different coat on, a black one with a very sort of high-standing collar. It might be the same one he saw him wear in the reunion with Victor, but I do think it is a different one. The next and final ensemble we see William in is his wedding outfit. This one is also the most similar to the first time we ever saw William as a child. He wears silver grey trousers and a tailcoat of the same color over a white shirt and silvery waistcoat. His necktie is an ivory silk, and again we have this detailing of a feathery sheer fabric decorating the shirt that was present before. I say this is similar to William as a child because then silver was also part of his wardrobe, but also because his outfit is the lightest thing he's worn as an adult. Adult William is almost always shown in these deep tones, jewel tones, but in a way that he seems to sort of fade into the background. He's never dressed as dark as Victor's all over black, not as flashy as Harlander, and even Elizabeth's dark jewel tones seem to take up more space due to the sheer shape and size of her clothing alone. This is the first time we really see William shown to us similarly as he was as a child, which is taking up space and being visible. As he is dying at the end of what was supposed to be his wedding night, he even talks about it. But he actually brought it up way before as well during the reunion. He always was in Victor's shadow in a way. He was even afraid of Victor. In Harlander, he presumably found something of a father figure, only to be replaced by his older brother again, since Victor had something Harlander wanted, something William couldn't give. So he gets essentially ushered away into the tower overseeing the construction. But at his own wedding, William is in charge. He is supposed to shine. It is his moment, and it mirrors Victor's memory of William as a child, basking in the affection and the attention from their father. William is an interesting figure to me. The William in the film kind of embodies both William from the book and Henry Clerval, though he lacks the close bond to Victor that Henry has. I feel like, in a way, William is just as much, maybe even more isolated from everybody than Victor is, and not even by choice. Victor grows up isolated against his will and then embraces and cultivates that isolation as an adult, whereas William seems to still look for connection at every corner, only to lose it again. And I think it shows in the way he is costumed in the film as well. Elizabeth is the only female character of importance in this movie other than Claire, and both of them are played by Mia Goth. But Elizabeth has a lot more screen time and a lot more costumes. The first one we see her in is in Harlander's Edinburgh residence, where she is shown almost posing in her uncle's photo studio holding a skull. The dress is immaculate and so insane. It looks like an 1860s evening or ball gown to me shape-wise, with the pointed bodice, the very wide Bertha, and her exposed shoulders. The dress is several different shades of blue, and it's made with what I assume has to be heaps and heaps of organza. I found so many pictures online from the London exhibit that led me to believe that at least one of the organza fabrics was either printed or dyed or painted with this flowy, almost water-like pattern. That specific pattern is visible on part of the bodice, definitely on the flowy cape-like oversleeves and on part of the skirt. It's really hard to determine how many different fabrics were used for the skirt itself, but I am guessing at least one gray or black one and at least 3 to 5 shades of blue, gathered and layered over top of each other. Tightly gathered ruffles of the same fabrics create the detailing on the bodice, along the cape sleeves and the bertha. And then she seems to be wearing a shift or undershirt of some sort underneath that is peeking out at the top of the bertha, and this one is a sheer black material. She wears golden jewelry with blue gemstones in the shape of scarab beetles and a sort of headdress made out of curved turquoise feathers. I'm thinking they're either parrot feathers or dyed rooster tail feathers. I'm not sure. The next time we see Elizabeth is at the market and in the church after the hanging Victor attends. He follows her into the church and tries to trick her in a confession stand, but she's very aware it is him, and the meeting turns into them going for supper and even dancing together. It is the scene where we find out a lot about Elizabeth's understanding of the world, her interest in the smallest of creatures, insects, and the first thing we see of her is actually her red umbrella. She's wearing a bonnet and a shawl, so we don't actually see her dress at first. The shawl is worn again later in the film, and it's this muted turquoisey color with a pattern that reminds me of moth wings. The bonnet is a pale yellow-green and decorated with feathers. The dress underneath is a gorgeous deep green with a printed pattern that looks like malachite. The sleeves are a tulle or another sheer green fabric with a slightly lighter green scallop ruffling at the seam where they're connecting to the bodice. With this dress, she also wears a multi-layered beaded necklace with a small crucifix, a necklace that we see her wear several times. She also rewears this dress at a later point in the film in a beautiful little scene where she's lounging on the floor painting beetles. It is very fitting. In this scene, she talks about her interest for insects, and her dress makes her look like a jewel beetle. The next dress she wears has a very similar pattern, but unlike the previous one, this one is a pale yellow, so it looks a lot less like malachite immediately. This is what I call the butterfly dress that she wears in the garden, and again, she is almost matching with the insects, this time a pale yellow butterfly breed. Her dress is made up of a base layer of yellow with that ring pattern, and then the bodice is additionally covered in one layer of a pale yellow organza, and the skirt in at least one white layer and 1 or 2 yellow ones, with a ruffle detail about 2/3 down the skirt. The bodice has dainty decorative buttons down the front, and again, sheer white sleeves with a ruffle detail at the cuff and another detail at the connection point to the bodice. And the neck has a long tie attached to it that is also made from a sheer yellow material. At first, I actually thought that had to be the ties of a bonnet, but she's actually not wearing a bonnet in the scene. It's just more detailing to the neck of the dress. In some of the photos from the exhibit in London, it also looks like the sheer layer of the bodice was stitched on top of the back lacing, but I'm not sure if that is maybe just like the pictures, or if it actually was a layer stitched close after the main dress was already on the body. It is the daintiest dress Elizabeth wears, the only really light color, as she gravitates to these jewel tones, and it looks absolutely stunning in the natural sunlight of the scene. She really looks like the butterflies, and the symbolism of that is obviously very funky, especially as she and Victor are talking about trapping the insects in the scene, and then in a later scene she directly compares herself to those trapped butterflies. We only get a brief glimpse at her dress at Harlander's soiree, but it is blue again, with a long fringe on the bertha this time, as well as some sort of beading that makes it glitter, and the same black sheer shift thing underneath. She also wears a feather headdress again that matches her first one, but this one looks to either be a dark green or black, and it's also finer, thinner feathers. The next big scene of hers is when she visits Victor in his lab and essentially tells him to stop pursuing her, that she has made a choice. This is the scene I was talking about where she compares herself to the trapped butterfly. Her dress in this scene is red. A darker red than Claire's, but red nonetheless. It is cut almost the same as her green dress, and it has a organic, plant-like looking patterning. The sleeves are not sheer, but the same material as the dress, with a small purple ruffle or trim of some sort at the opening. These are also, I think, the only sleeves of her dress is not ending in a tight wrist cuff, but open, and she wears black lace crochet, I believe, gloves. She also wears the moth wing shawl again and a bonnet that matches the pattern on the outside and that is filled with this red ruffling on the inside. The ruffles sort of frame her face similarly to the sides of the coffin we saw Claire get buried in, which is very definitely a conscious choice. In the moment Victor is rejected by Elizabeth, she looks the most like Claire, and she's clothed in her color. And it is immediately after this rejection that Victor has his eureka moment about how to revive his creature. Just, the symbolism here is amazing. And additionally, it is such an important moment for Elizabeth, a rare moment of autonomy and agency, which is incredible because her character is kind of defined by how trapped and without agency she feels. We don't see her again until after the creature has been resurrected, when her and William go to the tower looking for Victor. She wears a dress that I had such a hard time figuring out the color of. Based on the movie and the photos in the exhibit, I think it's a shifting color moment. Depending on the angle and the light, it's either more green or golden. Actually, technically, I believe this ensemble to be a dress and an overjacket. The skirt of the dress is plain in that sort of shifting greenish gold, and the sleeves are made from a sheer material in a yellowy golden color. The jacket over top is made in a matching golden greenish material with swirling organic patterns in darker green, a rusty red, and a turquoisey blue, and the sleeves go sort of half the way and then open up like small capes. The buttons on the front of the jacket are decorated with little tassels in turquoise and gold green, and there is matching fringe all along the bottom of the jacket. She wears a large bonnet with this, a blue-green patterned bonnet with long magenta silk ties, and then a turquoise veil that covers the entire bonnet and half of her dress, but it seems to not be attached. I think it's its own piece of fabric. She also wears small, sheer turquoise gloves. I believe this is the most covered up we see her in the entire film, and this is how she looks when she first meets the creature. It is such a lovely, gentle moment. She removes her veil to look at the creature with very obvious symbolism. We all know the symbolism of a veil lifted, and the creature takes her sheer gloves off as well. It's just such a gentle, soft moment that Victor immediately crudely interrupts. And it sets up not only Elizabeth's following interactions with the creature and with Victor, but actually the secondary role she fulfills in this film. The film pays homage to a lot of classic iterations of Frankenstein, especially through Elizabeth, but there's a different costume that I want to save this bit for now. Her next costume is again in a scene where she interacts with the creature. It's night, and she is therefore wearing a nightgown. It is a pale blue and incredibly sheer with only some ruffle trim detailing. It's the only costume we see her in where she isn't being swallowed up by the large skirts and the crinoline, and it makes her look so much smaller and fragile and vulnerable, and I believe this to be incredibly intentional. This is the first time somebody interacts kindly with the creature since it was first brought to life, and it's coming from Elizabeth with such gentle vulnerability. It's beautiful. The costume doesn't get a lot of screen time, but it is one of the most symbolically interesting ones to me regarding Elizabeth. It's also the first time we see her with her hair down. Her entire look in this scene is suddenly completely different, a lot more intimate. This is the private Elizabeth, not the Elizabeth that is ready to go out in public, and it means a lot to see this side of a character that is normally so guarded. And then her final costume, the grand finale, the wedding dress. My God, what a dress! It's made from what I'm guessing is white silk, with at least one layer of a sheer white fabric overlaying the skirt. The bodice shape intrigues me. It has these details that remind me of corset boning, as well as of a stylized rib cage. There is this arched shape and a sort of mock Bertha of sheer white ruffles. It has the same cape-like oversleeves as on the blue dress we first see her in, this time purely white with a trim of the same material that looks sort of like feathers to me. Two ornate silver brooches sit on either side of her bodice, and dainty silver chains dangle down from them. She's wearing the same red crucifix necklace she wears with most of her outfits, and her hair is down, with the front strands being very subtly pinned back to free up her face. And then there are the sleeves. Oh my goodness, the sleeves. They are made out of long, silky ribbons wrapping around her arms, down to her wrists and loosely tied around her hands in what is very clearly an homage and a reference to the Bride of Frankenstein dress. It also references the bandages the creature is in. But I think it's mainly meant to reference the Bride of Frankenstein, because that is the role Elizabeth fulfills, beyond her role from the book. Elizabeth in this movie expressed multiple times that she feels out of place and out of control, and she is continuously characterized as this kind, caring person, the only person to look at the creature and seeing it in full clarity and to see a pure soul and nothing more. So when the creature appears at the estate that night to ask Victor for a companion, of course Elizabeth wants to protect it, and she dies in the process. Honestly, the visual is so haunting yet beautiful. The red of the blood seeping down the layers of her skirt as the creature carries her out of the estate in a mockery of, carrying your wife over the doorstep and into the wintry cave. Kate Hawley, the costume designer, actually uploaded a photo from the making of the bloody version of this dress, and they made it in such a clever way. I'm guessing that there are probably 3 versions of the dress for the shoot. The pure white version, a version where they could actively have liquid flow down the skirt on camera, and a final version for the cave scene. And for that scene, the version of the dress seems to have been made from scratch, then painted with red dye wherever the blood had to be, and then a clean white layer of organza seems to have been added on top, which creates a sort of ghost-like effect. It's such a beautiful, sad moment. Elizabeth is, in a sense, the bride of the creature. The creature is who she is seen in her most intimate and vulnerable state with, and she speaks of love as she dies, but instead of ever getting the chance to be the companion the creature asks for, she is doomed to fate. God, it hurts me so badly, and it is so beautiful. Elizabeth is such a complex and interesting character in this movie, and the costumes they have her in fascinate me so much. The way the sheer fabrics and the jewel tones and the subtle symbolism are used to show when she is or isn't guarded, when she's letting herself be vulnerable, and when she feels in control or doesn't feel in control. It's just so gorgeous. Oh my god. I saved my favorite character for last, and yes, I am basic, but the creature is my favorite character in this movie. And it's actually kind of tricky to talk costuming for it, since it isn't dressed the same manner human characters are, but we will get to that. Firstly, barely counts as clothing, honestly, but when the creature is first brought to life, it wears nothing more than bandages and the tiniest excuse for underpants that are really just pieces of wrapping. These aren't clothes so much as functional pieces of the resurrection process, and Victor doesn't even think to attempt to clothe his creation. The best it gets is a red blanket that Victor covers the creature with after first locking it up in the sewers, and that's it. Tight, tiny underpants made out of fabric wrappings and a blanket. The lack of clothing not only displays the patched together appearance of the creature, it also shows a lack of agency and autonomy. Victor doesn't clothe it because he views it first and foremost as an experiment, something to monitor and not something that might be deserving of dignity. The first time the creature clothes itself is after the explosion at the tower and after it has walked through the woods a while. It finds the skulls of people who have died, presumably a long time ago and likely in a battle. And it finds a coat. It's a large army coat, blue faded wool overgrown with moss, torn and shredded thanks to time and the elements, and on the back, the spine of the previous owner is literally molded into the fabric. This is my absolute favorite piece of costuming in this entire film, by the way. This is it. This coat. I am so obsessed with the spine detail. It makes sense that it would be there. Presumably the wool has been sitting on this skeleton for ages, since nothing but bones remain, and at any fall of rain the fabric would have been soaked and then dried onto the bare vertebrae. It was essentially wet molded onto the bones of its previous wearer, and when the creature puts it on, the visible imprints of that previous wearer remain. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's a beautiful detail. And again, it is a recall to the importance of the spine that is given throughout the entire film. And it's also at the same time a reminder that the creature is wearing something not made for it, in a world not shaped nor ready for it. In a way, it is almost an intruder and entirely out of place. The coat also at the same time symbolizes the creature trying to take autonomy and dignity on for itself. It puts on clothing, it tries to make itself fit into a human mold. It so desperately wants to be a person, appreciated and loved, and the coat is that first step towards that. Anyways, I'm not getting emotional, you are. Over time, as the creature lives in the barn and later in the house with the old man, it scrounges and scavenges more clothing together. I'm guessing it's either taken from the family or even gifted by the family. Maybe some of it is also scavenged from other cadavers in the woods. But at some point, it is not wearing just the coat, it is actually wearing trousers, a sort of fur-detailed set of shoes, and in the time with the old man, it also starts wearing a shirt and a vest or jacket of some sort that looks to be made out of leather and a maybe canvas-like fabric, and then the coat is worn over top of everything whenever the creature's going out. After the wolves attack the cottage and kill the old man, and as the creature arrives at the Frankenstein estate, it also wears the dark fur of one of the wolves around its shoulders. At least I'm assuming that it's meant to be the fur of the same animal, since the movie makes a point to show the creature killing that specific wolf. I'm not sure how it would have gone back to grab the pelt from the cottage though, after having been shot to death by the other family members, so maybe it is a different fur. At either case, it wears a long-haired dark fur over its shoulders. And then we already have the last costume. The things the creature wears on the ice in the Arctic seem thrown together. I think they are partially the same clothes it wore before and partially new. I'm not sure if the coat is still the same one or not, but if it is, then it is wearing a second one over top, since the original coat didn't have that wide, deep hood. And it also has gathered a few new furs that it's wearing. It also has a piece of fabric, maybe a scarf, wrapped around its head and part of its face underneath the hood. It's not really clothes as much as rags and pieces of fur, and it's even worse after it tries to kill itself with Victor's dynamite, because now it is scorched and even more destroyed, and all of this is just underlining again the inhumanness of the creature, contrasted so strongly against its wish for humanity. By the end, the shirt is actually so torn, essentially the entire chest is exposed, giving it some more vulnerability, adding onto that conflicting imagery. Okay, we have reached the end. Of course, these are not actually all of the costumes. Like I said, I've decided against talking about the guests at the wedding feast, background characters, or the family in the cottage. Not because their costumes aren't also interesting, but because I really wanted to focus primarily on the main cast's costumes and the costume symbolism. That is why I included the serving staff at the estate as well, and yeah. It's because their costuming fed into my analysis of the costumes of the entire family. In case this entire video has not made it extremely obvious, I am obsessed with the costuming of this film. There's so much symbolism, there's so much texture. God, I love seeing textures. I love seeing characters who pair different pieces of clothing with each other that we've seen them wear before. I love seeing shapes and bonnets and top hats and velvets and like little bits like the bleach stains and tears in fabric and the veil Elizabeth wears fraying at the edges. Things that make costumes feel real and alive. Honestly, I'm obsessed with the film in general. I stopped watching it in theaters, I cried again rewatching it, and it's like, I am irreparably and irreversibly changed by this film, and I couldn't be happier. I also cannot wait for my behind the scenes book to arrive, so I can get even more obsessed whilst finding out even more about how this film was made. And also, I will be able to use the book to see how much of my interpretation of the costumes was, right or wrong. So my autism is very pleased. Anyways, that is all I have. I apologize that I didn't really speak on the historical aspects of the costumes much, but I'm no dress historian. I'm just a nerd with too many thoughts about filmmaking and costumes. I hope you enjoyed this though. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you stuck around all the way to the end. And if you're still here, I'd really appreciate it if you left a comment. I spent a lot of time on this video, and if you enjoyed it, I would just love to hear from you. Also, everybody please look at the beetle I made. Hi, this is Puffin from the future. I was at my parents' over the weekend and the book arrived. I literally just finished writing and recording and halfway editing this essay and the book arrived. Thankfully, going through the sections on the costuming, I've not had time to read this entire thing yet. It's over 300 pages, but I read all the bits on the costuming and the costume design and character design, and Thankfully, I didn't have to redo the entire essay, so I'll just put some edits here. So the pattern on Elizabeth's blue dress is actually apparently an X-ray, not water, which is so cool. That is such a cool idea. Then Henry, apparently they were... not Henry! William! I did this so much in writing the essay, I kept writing Henry, because he sort of also embodies the character of Henry. Anyway, William, apparently they had him in golden fabrics a lot of the time to make him symbolize sunlight. In like, oh, Victor is the darkness, sort of, and Henry's the sunlight. This is very broken down. That's something I didn't quite pick up because, like I said in the essay, I had a really hard time telling what color some of William's costumes really were. So that's just a little like adding onto it. And then also, so I use the name Alphonse for Frankenstein Sr. in this video. Apparently, in this movie, he's called Leopold. I did not know this. I don't think they actually ever say his name in the film. So yeah, if you're confused for some reason why I'm saying Alphonse, that's his name in the book. I didn't realize they changed both of the parents' names. But that's all. That is all the things I really have to add. So I'm really proud of myself. Also, this is a really wonky thing to put at the end of the video. And also, I'm gonna go now. I have 300 pages of really cool stuff to read. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!